I'd never been one to scour Craigslist for deals. I'm more of a face-to-face, shake-on-it kind of guy. But there I was, hunting for the perfect birthday surprise for my roommate, Mike. After endless scrolling, a gem popped up. A pristine ping-pong table, just the kind Mike had been ranting about for our game nights. The price was a steal, and the seller, a guy named Rick, lived just across town. Everything seemed perfect, maybe too perfect, but I chalked it up to good luck. The day to pick up the table came, and I felt a mix of excitement and slight apprehension. After all, meeting strangers from the internet isn't my usual Saturday agenda. To fit the table, I'd pulled out the back seats of my truck, a little detail that made the whole endeavor feel more significant, more real. As I drove through the winding streets to Rick's place, the evening sun cast long shadows, giving the quiet neighborhood an eerie calm. Pulling up to the address Rick had given, I texted him, "I'm here." The response was immediate, a simple, "Come to the front door." His house was one of those mid-century models, modest but well-kept, with a front yard battling the onset of autumn. I stepped out, locked the truck, and hurried to the front door, rehearsing a friendly greeting. Rick opened the door just as I reached for the bell. He was a tall, gaunt figure, his deep-set eyes giving nothing away. I extended my hand, but it hung awkwardly in the air as he seemingly ignored it, turning on his heel and motioning for me to follow him. The house had a peculiar scent, a mix of old books and something smoky, almost like burnt cotton. Weird but not a deal-breaker, I thought, trying to keep my judgment in check. We descended into the basement, the stairs creaking under our weight. The ping-pong table stood in the center, just as advertised, in all its glory. Rick's voice broke the silence. "Oh shoot, gotta find the paddles." He darted upstairs, leaving me alone with the table and the lingering smell that now seemed to permeate the basement air. Left to my own devices, I started to wander around the room. The basement felt lived in, with personal touches that seemed at odds with the man I'd just met. Pictures framed and placed on various pieces of furniture caught my eye. They were all solo shots of Rick, except for one with a dog. No family, no friends? I wondered, feeling a twinge of pity mixed with my growing curiosity. Minutes stretched longer as I waited. The silence of the house began to weigh on me, pushing my boundaries of comfort. Drawn by a mix of impatience and a nagging gut feeling, I ventured further into the basement. A door ajar beckoned me into what appeared to be a laundry room, doubling as storage. A desk with its drawer half open seemed out of place in the meticulously kept space. Curiosity overcame caution, and I pulled the drawer fully open. Inside, a stack of old Polaroid photos made my heart skip a beat. They weren't quaint reminders of a bygone era. No, these were snapshots of terror. A girl, bound and gagged, her eyes screaming the fear that her covered mouth could not. Beside the photos were folders, meticulously labeled from A to Z. A cold shiver ran down my spine as the reality of what I was seeing hit me. I was in the house of a monster. Panic surged, but I stifled it, thinking of how I needed to handle this. I reached for my phone to take pictures of the evidence, but the signal was dead, swallowed by the thick basement walls. The need to leave became urgent. I retraced my steps to the stairs, only to find that the door I'd come through was now locked. My heart pounded in my chest as I jiggled the handle in vain. Rick's raspy voice floated down from the other side. "Sorry, the door sometimes locks itself. Let me find the key." His words did nothing to calm me. Instead, they fueled a frantic search for any tool that could help. Back at the utility desk, I rummaged through the drawers, my hands shaking as I grasped at screwdrivers of varying sizes. With the smallest one, I rushed back to the door, my survival instinct overtaking fear. The screwdriver fit the keyhole, awkwardly but just enough to turn the lock. As the lock clicked open, I didn't pause to think. I sprinted up the stairs, burst through the door, and didn't stop running until I was back at my truck. The engine roared to life under my trembling hands, and I drove without looking back, straight to the nearest police station. Sitting in the fluorescent-lit safety of the police station, I recounted everything, showing the officers the little evidence I had managed to capture on my phone before the basement's dead zone had claimed it. They listened intently, their expressions grave. The seriousness of their response confirmed my worst fears. As I finished, an officer placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing coming here. We'll handle it from here." Leaving the station, the weight of what might have been pressed heavily on me. The night air felt colder now, a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked in unsuspecting places. The days following my escape from Rick's house were fraught with tension and sleepless nights. My mind replayed the horrific images and the close call over and over, each time with a chilling clarity. The police had moved swiftly. By the next morning, they had cordoned off Rick's house and begun a thorough investigation. My role in uncovering this had suddenly cast me into a spotlight I never sought. A witness in a potential criminal case against a man who traded in the darkest of human sufferings. The community was in shock as details began to leak. Rick, a seemingly quiet and unassuming man, had been living a double life, one that involved the deep web and a network of child pornography that spanned across states. The pictures I had stumbled upon were just the tip of the iceberg. The folders, meticulously labeled from A to Z, contained detailed records and other photographic evidence of his crimes. It was a well-organized catalog of horror that had been hidden just beneath the surface of his ordinary suburban home. As the investigation deepened, the police uncovered more than just photographic evidence. There were hard drives, meticulously encrypted, that contained videos and an extensive list of contacts that implicated more individuals. It was a network, a syndicate that exploited the vulnerable, and Rick was at its center. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming, and the fact that I had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous encounter with Rick was a constant reminder of how close I had come to danger. In the weeks that followed, I was called in to give my statement multiple times. The detectives were thorough, ensuring they had every detail nailed down. My truck, the back seats of which I had removed to transport the ping-pong table, was now a piece of evidence, albeit minor, in a much larger case. I cooperated fully, driven by a mix of civic duty and a deep-seated desire to see justice served. The trial was set to begin in a few months, and as it approached, the reality of what I would face became more daunting. I would have to testify, to relive that night in front of a courtroom, and face Rick once again, this time with him sitting at the defendant's table. The thought was unnerving. I spent nights researching how to handle being a witness, how to manage the stress and the emotional toll it would take. During this time, my relationship with my roommate, Mike, became one of my few solaces. He had been supportive throughout the ordeal, understanding when I jumped at shadows or was lost in thought. He never pushed me to talk about it, but was always there when I did. Our home became my sanctuary, a place where I could try to find some semblance of normalcy. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courthouse was an imposing building, and as I walked up its steps, the weight of what was about to happen settled heavily on my shoulders. Inside, the courtroom was stark, the air thick with anticipation. I took my place, waiting for my turn to testify, my heart pounding in my chest. When I was called to the stand, I took a deep breath, my hands steady but my voice carrying a slight tremor. I recounted everything, from the moment I saw the Craigslist ad to the harrowing discovery in Rick's basement. The prosecution was methodical, walking me through each step, ensuring that the jury understood the gravity of my discovery. Rick's defense was aggressive, trying to poke holes in my testimony, suggesting that I had somehow misinterpreted what I had seen. The trial went on for days, each one a marathon of testimonies and evidence presentations. Other victims and witnesses testified, each story a painful echo of the terror that Rick had inflicted. The jury's deliberations took longer than expected, a nerve-wracking wait that tested everyone involved. When the verdict was finally announced, the relief was palpable. Rick was found guilty on multiple counts of child pornography and trafficking. The courtroom was heavy with mixed emotions: relief for the justice served, sorrow for the pain caused, and a sobering reminder of the evil that had been operating right under our noses. As I left the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter yet still somber. The experience had changed me, made me more aware of the darkness in the world, but also of the strength of those who fight against it. I realized then that life would never be the same, but perhaps, in some small way, I had helped make it better by stopping one more perpetrator from harming others. Back at home, Mike had set up the new ping pong table, a different one, purchased from a reputable store this time. As we rallied back and forth, the rhythmic sound of the ball hitting the table was therapeutic, a simple joy that helped me start to move past the darkness I had encountered. It was a reminder that life goes on, often in the simple, everyday moments that we take for granted. It was the summer of my 23rd year, and the shimmering promise of adult life was unfolding before me. I'd just signed the lease for my first real apartment, a quaint, ground-floor unit at Maple Grove Complex in the heart of a small, bustling town in Virginia. The place wasn't much, but it was all mine, a symbol of independence and the start of something new. I spent that sultry June afternoon weaving through traffic and picking up last-minute supplies. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of warm asphalt and blooming jasmine, typical of Virginia summers. My boyfriend, Jake, was on the phone, his voice a comforting presence amid the chaos of moving boxes and unpacking. He was recounting his day at the office, but my mind was on the maze of cartons surrounding me. "I'll just grab my mail, and then we can chat more," I told him, stepping out of the apartment, the door clicking shut behind me. Our complex was old, with ivy crawling up its brick walls and a heavy iron gate that creaked mournfully every time it swung open. As I shuffled through a stack of envelopes, mostly bills and a few flyers, I couldn't shake the feeling of accomplishment. My place, my life, my rules. Returning to the apartment, I plopped onto the edge of my still new bed, the mattress squeaking slightly under my weight. Jake was still on the line, laughing about a mishap with the office printer, when my phone slipped from my hand and skittered across the hardwood floor, landing under the bed. "Shoot," I dropped my phone. "Hang on a sec," I said, the line going quiet as I laid flat on the floor, reaching into the dim space beneath the bed. That's when I saw it. Something so unexpected that my heart stuttered in shock. There, in the shadowy confines under my bed, was a person. A real, live person, lying still with his back toward me, head tucked down as though in slumber. My breath hitched, terror rooting me to the spot. Managing a whisper, I spoke into the phone. "Sorry, Jake, I need to take a quick shower. I'll call you right back." There was no time to wait for a response. With my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, I got up and tiptoed to the bathroom, which was mercifully close. My hands shook as I locked the door behind me, the click of the lock sounding unnaturally loud in the cramped space. I turned the shower on to full blast, hoping the sound would cover any noise I made as I frantically opened the small bathroom window and squeezed through, my body fueled by adrenaline. Once outside, I didn't stop to look back. My apartment was on the first floor, and thankfully, it was just a short drop to the ground. I sprinted across the street, ducking behind a parked car, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. From there, I could just make out the outline of my bathroom window, left gaping open in my hurried escape. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "There's someone in my apartment," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper as I explained the situation. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline, instructing me to stay put and keep an eye on the apartment until help arrived. The wait felt interminable. The golden hues of the setting sun were replaced by the softer, diffused light of dusk. Cars passed by, their occupants oblivious to the drama unfolding. Finally, Jake's familiar car pulled up beside me, his expression morphing from concern to horror as he took in my disheveled state. "Are you okay?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders, just as the first police cruiser turned into the lot. I nodded, unable to find my voice, as I handed over my keys to the responding officers. They moved quickly, disappearing into the building. Moments later, 2 officers emerged, escorting a gaunt figure between them. His hair was matted, his clothes ragged and dirty, his eyes wide and wild. He didn't struggle, just let himself be led away, a defeated slump to his shoulders. One of the officers came over to us, his expression grim. "He was standing right outside your bathroom door, holding one of your kitchen knives," he explained, his voice steady but kind. "Looks like he slipped in while the door was momentarily open. We've got him in custody now. He'll be evaluated and taken to a secure facility." Jake held me tighter, his presence a solid reassurance. "I'm moving in," he said, the decision final. "I'm not letting you stay here alone, not after this." As the adrenaline faded, replaced by a bone-deep chill, I leaned into him, grateful for his warmth, for the swift response of the police, and for the escape that had saved my life. But as we stood there, watching the last light fade from the sky, I knew that this night would haunt me, a stark reminder of the fragility of safety and the shadows that can lurk in any corner, waiting. Yesterday, while lounging at my sister's house in the sprawling, sunlit backyard, I watched my son and my nephews play. The laughter and shrieks of joy should have been the only things on my mind, but a mundane act by one of my nephews, Harrison, who was absent-mindedly peeling bark off a tree, triggered a memory so vivid and chilling that I couldn't help but mutter, "So weird," under my breath. My mom, always alert to the nuances of her children, picked up on it immediately. "What's weird?" she asked with a concerned look, her knitting needles pausing mid-air. The memory was from my childhood, a bizarre and frightening encounter that I had somehow buried deep in the recesses of my mind. We were living in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where the end of the school day was marked by kids flooding the streets, heading to the nearest bit of wilderness for an adventure. For us, that was the Pinecone Forest, a patch of trees along the roadside that wasn't really a forest but was the closest thing we had to one. I found myself recounting the story to my mom and sister, the words spilling out of me as if eager to escape. I was about 8 or 9, waiting for my friend Frankie to finish his homework so we could play. I was in the Pinecone Forest, just killing time, peeling bark from one of the trees. That's when I met him, The man emerged seemingly out of nowhere. His presence was sudden and unnerving, and I remember the smell of stale cigarette smoke that clung to him, assaulting my senses before I even fully saw his face. When I did, it did little to ease the unease that had instantly settled in. He wasn't very old, maybe in his 40s, but his lazy, cloudy eye and the yellow stains on his teeth and fingernails made him appear grizzled and worn. Despite my initial fear, my mom had always taught me to be polite, so I mustered a weak smile and greeted him. His response was to ask what I was doing, his voice raspy, the stench of his breath making me want to step back. "I'm just picking the bark off this tree," I replied, trying to sound casual and unbothered. He frowned, then said something that sent chills down my spine. "You shouldn't do that. It's like picking off the tree's skin. How would you feel if someone picked off your skin?" As he said this, he reached out and pinched my arm with his sharp, yellowed nails. I recoiled instantly, not just from the physical touch but from the malice in his tone. Just then, salvation came in the form of Frankie's mom, Sonia. She called out to me from her doorstep, her voice a familiar and comforting sound. "Come in and wait inside," she shouted, an unusual urgency in her tone. At the time, I didn't think much of the whole thing. I was just relieved to be away from the strange man. Later, when I told my mom about the encounter, her face clouded with something that looked like guilt, or perhaps fear. She confessed that she thought I had forgotten about the incident, and thus had never brought it up again. But now, she decided it was time I knew the whole story. Sonia, ever the vigilant neighbor, had noticed a white van with no windows parked by the pine cone forest that morning. It was an unusual sight, and she kept an eye on it, feeling a gnawing unease. From her front window, which faced the forest, she could see me and the van. When she saw the man approach me and then pinch me, she didn't hesitate. She called the police immediately. The police stopped the man just outside our neighborhood. What they found in his van was the stuff of nightmares. Binoculars, a Polaroid camera, and walls covered in pictures of me. Photos taken without my knowledge, capturing my every routine. But the horror didn't end there. Upon his arrest, they discovered he had a key to a storage unit. Inside, the police found an array of knives, anatomy books, obstetrical equipment, duct tape, and empty buckets. The center of the unit held an old medical bed fitted with restraints and covered in plastic wrap. My mom's voice trembled as she relayed this to me, her eyes moist with unshed tears. "He's locked up in a high-security facility for the criminally insane now," she finished, her voice barely a whisper. The revelation that this man had intended to harm me, to make me a victim of whatever twisted fantasy he harbored, was overwhelming. It explained the protective bubble my parents had kept me in for years, always cautious, always fearful but never wanting to frighten me with the truth. As I finished recounting this story to my mom and sister, the weight of my narrow escape, the monstrous reality of what could have been, settled over us. The sunny day seemed to dim, the children's laughter a distant echo against the gravity of my past. It was a stark reminder that monsters did exist, and sometimes they hid in plain sight, masked by the ordinary, waiting for a moment to strike. As I sat there on the porch with my family, the chill from the story lingered in the air, mixing uneasily with the sounds of the children playing innocently in the yard. It was hard to reconcile such darkness with the bright, ordinary day around us. Yet, the tale was a grim reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk in seemingly safe places. After revealing the full extent of the harrowing encounter, my mother explained why she and my father had become so protective over the years, often to a degree that I found smothering as I grew into my teens. They knew the extent of the danger I had narrowly escaped that day in the pine cone forest, and it had forever altered their perception of the world. Their vigilance was not just parental concern. It was a response to a very real threat that had come far too close to home. In the aftermath of the incident, our neighborhood had changed. The carefree days of letting children roam from yard to yard were curtailed. Parents were more watchful, more suspicious of unfamiliar faces. The white van and the man with the cloudy eye became cautionary tales whispered among adults when they thought their children were out of earshot. My own life was also deeply affected by learning of these events. Knowing how close I had come to becoming a victim left me with a mix of emotions: anger, fear, but also an intense drive to understand human behavior, perhaps as a way to regain some control. This drive eventually led me to study psychology in college, focusing on criminal behavior and victimology. It wasn't just academic interest. It was personal, a way to unpack and process the trauma that had hovered over my childhood. As an adult, I became an advocate for child safety, giving talks at schools and community centers about the importance of vigilance and the signs of predatory behavior. Sharing my story wasn't easy. Each retelling brought back the fear and vulnerability of that day. Yet, with each session, I hoped to educate others, to potentially save families from experiencing similar ordeals. Life moved on. I had children of my own, and with them, the challenge of balancing my protective instincts with the need to let them explore the world became a daily navigation. I taught them about safety in ways that were age-appropriate, hoping to empower rather than frighten them. Watching them play in the yard under the watchful eyes of my family, I felt a surge of determination. My past would inform their protection, but it would not dampen their joy. Eventually, the children's laughter broke through the somber mood on the porch. My sister nudged me gently, a silent message of support. My mom squeezed my hand, her way of saying we had made it through the storm together. The day faded into evening, and as I watched my son and nephews chase each other around the yard, their faces alight with joy, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my escape, for my family's support, and for the life I had built from the shadows of that long-ago encounter.